Zarathek flexed his four massive arms as he stepped off the transport shuttle. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed black under the space station's artificial lights. At 12 feet tall and weighing nearly 1,000 pounds, the Catherian mercenary was an impressive sight. Razor-sharp mandibles clicked together as he surveyed the crowded docking bay of Nexus Station. Other aliens moved quickly out of his path. A family of blue-skinned Altarians hurried their younglings behind a cargo container. Two insectoid traders froze completely until he passed. Zarathek's reputation preceded him across the galaxy. For 20 years he had been the most feared mercenary in known space. His species, the Catherians, were natural predators. They evolved on a death world where everything tried to kill everything else. Their bodies were living weapons, armored skin, venomous fangs, strength that could crush steel, and reflexes faster than most species could even see. Zarathek had never lost a contract, never failed a mission. His success rate was perfect because he showed no mercy and felt no fear. The galaxy's criminal underworld paid him enormous sums to eliminate problems that others could not handle. Today's job seemed simple enough. A human merchant named David Chen had been causing trouble for the syndicate. The human had discovered one of their slave operations and threatened to expose it to the Galactic Council. Such threats could not be tolerated. Humans were a relatively new species in galactic society. They had only joined the community 50 years ago. Most aliens considered them weak and primitive. They had no natural weapons, thin skin, and were smaller than most sapient species. Their homeworld was classified as a garden world, pleasant and safe compared to the harsh environments that produced the galaxy's dominant species. Zarathek had never bothered to learn much about humans. He assumed they were typical prey species that had somehow stumbled into space travel. The syndicate certainly wasn't worried about one human merchant. They just wanted him gone quietly before he became a bigger problem. The mercenary made his way through the station's commercial district. Nexus Station was neutral territory, a massive facility that served as a trading hub for dozens of species. The main corridors stretched for miles, lined with shops, restaurants, and businesses catering to every imaginable need. Zarathek's target operated a small trading post in one of the middle-tier sections. As he walked, the mercenary noticed several humans among the crowd. They looked so fragile compared to the armored Brutalians or the crystalline Sectar. Most stood only 6 feet tall at most, with soft pink or brown skin and no visible weapons or defenses. One human female actually smiled at him as he passed. Zarathek was puzzled by this reaction. Most species either fled or showed submission when they saw him. This human seemed completely unafraid. Perhaps they were too primitive to recognize danger when they saw it. The trading post came into view ahead. It was a modest operation, with Chen Universal Imports written in several languages above the entrance. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Zarathek could see shelves lined with various goods from across the galaxy. The operation looked successful but unremarkable. Zarathek activated his wrist communicator to contact his handler at the Syndicate. A holographic image of Vexmore, a reptilian Soran, materialized above the device. "Target located," Zarathek reported in his clicking, multi-toned voice. "Proceeding with elimination." "Good," Vexmore replied. "Make it look like an accident. We don't want the Galactic Council investigating. Humans have some kind of protection treaty with the Council now." "Understood. Payment transfer?" "Already in your account. Clean this up quickly." The communication ended, and Zarathek studied the trading post more carefully. There were customers inside, a mix of species examining goods and talking with staff. He would need to wait for the right moment when the human was alone, or nearly alone. Patience was one of Zarathek's greatest strengths. He had once waited 3 days without moving to eliminate a target. He found a position across the corridor where he could observe without being obvious and settled in to watch. Over the next 2 hours, he learned more about his target. David Chen appeared to be in his 40s, with graying black hair and an average build for a human. He moved confidently through his shop, greeting customers warmly and negotiating deals with practiced ease. The human seemed to know many of the regular station residents personally. What struck Zarathek as unusual was how other species interacted with this human. A massive Corvan warrior, a species known for their aggression, actually clasped Chen on the shoulder in a friendly gesture. A group of normally territorial Zephyrian traders laughed at something Chen said. Even a Catherian couple nodded respectfully to the human merchant. This was strange behavior. In Zarathek's experience, prey species were tolerated by predator species at best. They certainly didn't earn genuine respect or friendship. Yet David Chen seemed to have done exactly that. As the hours passed, Zarathek noticed other details. Chen's trading post employed staff from several different species, all working together smoothly. The humans settled disputes between customers calmly and fairly. When a young Altarian accidentally broke an expensive item, Chen simply waved off the damage and told the frightened youngster not to worry about it. None of this changed Zarathek's mission, of course. A contract was a contract. But it did make him curious about what made this particular human different from what he expected. Near the end of the station's day cycle, the crowd in the trading post began to thin. Chen dismissed his staff for the evening and began closing up shop. This would be Zarathek's opportunity. The mercenary waited until only Chen remained in the store, then approached the entrance. The door sensor detected his presence and opened with a soft chime. "I'm sorry we're closed for the evening," Chen called out without looking up from his inventory pad. "But if it's urgent, I can help you with something quick." "I am here to speak with David Chen," Zarathek announced, his voice echoing in the empty shop. The human looked up and showed no visible reaction to seeing a 12-foot-tall armored predator in his store. His eyes were calm and alert, but not afraid. "That's me," Chen said with a slight smile. "I don't think we've met. I'm usually good with faces, especially memorable ones like yours. What can I do for you?" Zarathek was momentarily taken aback by this casual response. Most beings either panicked or immediately adopted submissive postures when confronted by a Catherian. This human acted as if dangerous aliens walked into his shop every day. "You have interfered with syndicate operations," Zarathek stated, deciding to be direct. "This interference must end." Chen's expression grew more serious, but he still showed no fear. "Ah, you're here about the slave operation I reported to the council. You will withdraw your report and cease all investigation into syndicate activities." "I'm afraid I can't do that," Chen replied calmly. "Those people, and I use the term loosely for some species, those beings were being held against their will. Some of them were children. I won't pretend I didn't see that." Zarathek's mandibles clicked together in annoyance. This was not going as expected. The human should be terrified and eager to comply. Instead, he seemed to be refusing a direct threat from a professional killer. "Perhaps you do not understand," Zarathek said, taking a step closer. His massive form loomed over the human. "I am Zarathek of the Catherian Dominion. I have killed over 300 beings in my career. I have destroyed armies and toppled governments. You are one small human. You cannot oppose me." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "I'm sure your reputation is well earned. But here's the thing, Zarathek, and I appreciate you giving me your name. That's courteous. I've seen what slavery does to people. I've seen the psychological scars, the broken families, the destroyed lives. Once you've seen that, you can't just look the other way because someone threatens you." The human paused, studying Zarathek's reaction. "I'm guessing someone paid you to come here and convince me to drop the matter. Probably paid you quite well. But I have to ask, do you actually know what you're protecting? Have you seen the operation yourself? Zarathek felt an unfamiliar sensation. In all his years as a mercenary, no target had ever tried to engage him in conversation like this. They begged, threatened, offered bribes, or attacked in desperation. None had ever asked him to consider the ethics of his contract. "The details do not concern me," Zarathek replied. "I complete contracts. That is my function." "Right. But you're clearly an intelligent being," Chen continued. "You've built a successful career, you communicate well, you plan and execute complex operations. You're not just some mindless weapon, so I'm curious, doesn't it matter to you what you're being asked to protect?" Something about the human's tone bothered Zarathek. There was no condescension or judgment in it. Chen seemed genuinely curious about his perspective, as if the human actually cared about his opinion. "You seek to delay your death with words," Zarathek accused. "No, I'm trying to understand you," Chen replied. "In my experience, most beings, even dangerous ones, have reasons for what they do, usually good reasons from their perspective. I'd like to know yours." Zarathek found himself in unprecedented territory. No contract had ever proceeded like this. He had expected fear, pleading, or perhaps a futile attempt at resistance. Instead, this human was treating him like an equal worthy of conversation. "I require payment to survive," Zarathek said slowly. "My skills have value in this galaxy. The strong prey upon the weak, regardless of my involvement. I simply provide efficiency to an existing process." "That's certainly one way to look at it," Chen agreed. "But efficiency in service of what, exactly? In this case, you're being asked to silence someone who reported child slavery. Does that seem like something the galaxy needs more efficiency in?" The question hung in the air between them. Zarathek realized he had never considered his contracts in such terms before. He completed jobs, collected payment, and moved on to the next assignment. The larger implications were not his concern. But for some reason, this human's perspective nagged at him. Perhaps it was because Chen spoke to him as an equal rather than cowering in fear. Perhaps it was because the human seemed genuinely interested in his thoughts rather than simply trying to save himself. "The nature of the contract does not change its completion requirements," Zarathek said finally. "No, I suppose it doesn't," Chen replied. "But it might change whether you want to complete it." The human moved to a nearby chair and sat down, looking relaxed, despite having a professional killer looming over him. This casual behavior was both puzzling and somehow insulting to Zarathek. "Do you know how humans ended up in space?" Chen asked conversationally. "You developed faster-than-light travel," Zarathek replied, unsure where this was leading. "Well, yes, but I mean the circumstances. We were contacted by a sector exploration vessel that detected our radio transmissions. When they arrived at Earth, they found us in the middle of what we call World War II. We were busy killing each other with industrial efficiency." Chen paused, looking thoughtful. "The sector were horrified, naturally. Most species go through some violent periods, but we were engaged in systematic slaughter on a scale they'd rarely seen. They almost left without making contact." "Why did they not leave?" Zarathek found himself asking. "Because they also saw something else. They saw humans risking their lives to save strangers, soldiers throwing themselves on grenades to protect their comrades, civilians hiding refugees at the cost of their own safety, medics running into battlefields to treat anyone who was wounded, regardless of which side they fought for." The human stood and moved to a display case containing various artifacts. "The sector realized that the same species capable of terrible violence was also capable of extraordinary sacrifice for others. They decided we were worth the risk of contact." Zarathek watched as Chen examined what appeared to be a primitive human weapon, some kind of projectile launcher. "This is from my grandfather," Chen said. noticing Zarathek's attention. He carried it during the war, killed 17 enemy soldiers with it, which should have made him a monster. But he also used it to defend a village full of civilians, including children from the species he'd been fighting against. Same weapon, same person, completely different purpose. The implication was clear, though Chen didn't state it directly. Tools and skills could serve different purposes depending on how they were used and why. "You compare me to a primitive weapon?" Zarathek asked, his mandibles clicking with irritation. "I compare you to my grandfather," Chen replied quietly. "Someone with the capability for violence who gets to choose how that capability is used." For several moments, neither spoke. Zarathek found himself considering concepts he had never examined before. Choice, purpose, the difference between capability and application. Finally, he spoke again. "You still refuse to withdraw your report?" "Yes," Chen said simply. "I won't help cover up slavery no matter who asks me to." "Then you force me to complete my contract." "I'm not forcing you to do anything," the human replied. "You're choosing to complete it, just like I'm choosing to refuse your demand. We're both making decisions based on what we think is right." Zarathek raised one of his massive arms, extending claws that could slice through metal. The human watched him calmly, showing no intention of fleeing or fighting back. "You do not fear death?" the mercenary asked. "Of course I fear death," Chen replied. "I have a wife, children, grandchildren. I have friends, responsibilities, things I still want to do. I'm just more afraid of becoming the kind of person who looks the other way when children are being sold as slaves." Something in the human's voice, not bravery or defiance, but simple determination, gave Zarathek pause. In 20 years of killing, he had never encountered anyone quite like David Chen. The mercenary stood motionless, claws extended, facing a species he had dismissed as weak and primitive. Yet this human had just demonstrated a kind of strength that Zarathek was not sure he understood. For the first time in his career, Zarathek hesitated to complete a contract. The silence stretched between them. Zarathek's claws remained extended, sharp enough to end the human's life with a single strike. Yet something held him back. In all his years as a mercenary, he had never hesitated like this. David Chen waited calmly. Watching the massive alien's face, the human seemed to recognize the internal struggle taking place. "You know," Chen said quietly, "there's something else you might want to consider." "Speak," Zarathek rumbled, his claws still poised. "The Syndicate didn't just hire you to silence me. They hired you to silence a human. Do you know why that matters?" Zarathek's mandibles clicked together in confusion. "Explain." Chen moved to his desk and activated a holographic display. Star charts appeared in the air between them, showing various sectors of the galaxy. 50 years ago, when humans first made contact with galactic civilization, we were exactly what you think we are: weak, primitive, barely worthy of notice. Most species saw us as potential slaves or simply ignored us completely. The display zoomed in on a particular system. Then something happened. A Brakari raiding fleet attacked one of our colony worlds, New Hebron, population about 2 million, mostly farmers and their families. The Brakari expected easy prey. Chen manipulated the controls and the display showed tactical readouts. The Brakari had superior technology, superior numbers, superior firepower. By every logical calculation, they should have conquered the planet in days. What occurred? Zarathek found himself asking, despite his professional detachment. The humans fought back, Chen said simply. Not just the Planetary Defense Force, everyone. Farmers, teachers, children old enough to hold weapons. They turned every building into a fortress, every field into a kill zone. When the Brakari landed, they found themselves fighting an entire population that refused to surrender. The tactical display showed movement patterns and casualty reports. The battle lasted 6 months, The Brakari finally withdrew, having lost 60% of their fleet to a supposedly primitive species that wasn't even supposed to be capable of organized resistance. Zarathek studied the data with professional interest. The human tactics were crude, but effective. More importantly, they showed a level of coordination and determination that he hadn't expected from a Garden World species. One victory against raiders proves little, he observed. You're right, Chen agreed, which is why the hegemony decided to test us properly. The display changed to show a much larger star system. The hegemony controlled 47 worlds and had been expanding aggressively for 3 centuries. They viewed the human victory over the Brakari as a fluke that needed correction. They sent a full conquest fleet to Earth itself. Zarathek's eyes widened slightly. The hegemony had been one of the galaxy's major powers before their mysterious downfall 50 years ago. Their fleets had been among the most powerful in known space. They brought 400 ships and 2 million soldiers, Chen continued. The entire Sol system had maybe 50 human vessels and a population that had never fought a real war in space. By every measure, we should have been obliterated. Yet Earth remains unconquered, Zarathek observed. Earth remains, period, Chen corrected. The hegemony doesn't. The mercenary's mandibles clicked in surprise. You destroyed an entire stellar empire? We didn't intend to, Chen said. We just intended to survive. But humans have this peculiar trait. When you threaten our families, our children, our homes, something changes in us. Something that most other species don't understand. The display showed the progression of what historians called the Sol War. The hegemony fleet entered our system expecting easy victory. Instead, they found that every human ship was willing to ram their vessels rather than surrender. Every human soldier would fight to the death rather than retreat. Every human civilian would sacrifice themselves to protect others. Zarathek watched the tactical data with growing unease. The human response patterns were unlike anything he had studied. Most species, when faced with overwhelming force, would seek accommodation or surrender. These humans seemed to become more dangerous as the situation grew more desperate. The hegemony admiral sent a surrender demand to Earth, Chen continued. Our response was broadcast across every communication frequency in the system, so every hegemony ship heard it clearly. What did your leaders say? Chen's expression grew grim. Our president at the time was an elderly woman named Sarah Martinez. Her response was exactly 4 words. Come and take it. The display showed the battle's progression over several months. The hegemony had superior technology and numbers, but they couldn't understand human psychology. When they destroyed one of our ships, the survivors would use escape pods as weapons. When they captured human soldiers, those soldiers would sabotage hegemony vessels from within, even knowing it meant their own deaths. Zarathek studied the casualty figures. They were staggering on both sides, but the pattern was clear. Human losses were replaced by increasingly desperate and effective tactics. Hegemony losses seemed to demoralize their forces. But here's what the hegemony never anticipated, Chen said, manipulating the display to show communication intercepts. Humans don't fight just for territory or resources. We fight for each other. Every time they killed human civilians, every time they destroyed a human ship, they weren't just reducing our numbers. They were creating more reasons for the survivors to hate them. Revenge motivation is common among predator species, Zarathek observed. This wasn't revenge, Chen replied. This was something else. Watch the communication patterns. The display showed thousands of messages between human vessels and planets. Zarathek read them with growing amazement. Instead of demands for vengeance, they were messages of encouragement, tactical coordination, and shared determination. Humans who had never met were coordinating complex military operations based solely on their species' loyalty. The hegemony broke first, Chen said quietly. Their soldiers started refusing orders. Their officers began requesting transfers away from human space. Their civilian population demanded the war end. They had the superior military, but they didn't have the will to match what humans were willing to sacrifice. And then other species noticed. The Venari Collective had been paying tribute to the hegemony for decades. When they saw a primitive species defeat their oppressors, they stopped paying. The Thakari Republic saw hegemony weakness and seized 3 border systems. Within 2 years, the hegemony collapsed completely. Chen deactivated the display and looked directly at Zarathek. All because they made the mistake of threatening humans seriously. Not just threatening one human or one human world, but pushing our entire species into the kind of rage that doesn't end until the threat is completely eliminated. The mercenary felt an unfamiliar sensation he gradually recognized as unease. You seek to intimidate me with historical records. I'm trying to help you understand what you're really dealing with, Chen replied. You see one middle-aged human merchant who reported a crime. What you're actually looking at is a member of the species that destroyed the hegemony because they threatened our families. Zarathek's communication device chimed. Another message from Vexmore appeared in holographic form. Status report, the Sauran demanded. The human should be eliminated by now. Complications have arisen, Zarathek replied, still watching Chen carefully. What complications? It's one primitive human. The target is more resilient than anticipated. Vexmore's reptilian features showed annoyance. Then stop playing with your prey and complete the contract. The Syndicate has other operations that depend on this human's silence. Understood, Zarathek said, ending the communication. Chen had listened to the exchange with interest. So the Syndicate has more operations they're worried about. More slavery, I'm guessing. That information is not relevant to my contract. It's relevant to mine, Chen replied, because now I know there's more than one operation to investigate. The human moved to his desk and began entering commands on his computer terminal. I should probably send another report to the Galactic Council, letting them know that the Syndicate is expanding their activities. Stop, Zarathek commanded, raising his claws again. Can't do that, Chen replied without looking up from his terminal. This is exactly the kind of thing I need to report. Children being sold into slavery, criminal organizations threatening witnesses. This is why the Galactic Council needs to know what's happening. Zarathek moved closer, his massive form looming over the desk. You will cease this action immediately. Or what? Chen asked, finally looking up. You'll kill me? That just proves my point about the Syndicate being willing to murder witnesses. If anything, my death would bring more attention to their operations, not less. The human was right, and Zarathek realized he was caught in an impossible situation. Killing Chen would likely bring exactly the kind of investigation the Syndicate wanted to avoid, but allowing him to continue would mean the failure of his contract. Besides, Chen continued, killing me won't solve the Syndicate's real problem. Explain. Chen smiled grimly. You didn't ask the right questions when you took this contract. You assumed the problem was one human who saw something he shouldn't have. But that's not actually what happened. The merchant pulled up another display showing shipping manifests and financial records. I didn't just stumble across that slave operation by accident. I've been investigating the Syndicate for 3 years. I have complete records of their operations, their finances, their contacts, their methods. Zarathek felt that unfamiliar unease growing stronger. You are a spy. I'm a merchant who noticed patterns, Chen corrected. Certain goods moving through certain routes at specific times. Financial transactions that didn't match the official manifests. Ships that disappeared for weeks at a time before returning with new cargo. The display showed an intricate web of connections spanning dozens of systems. The slave operation you were hired to protect? That's maybe 5% of what they're doing. I have evidence of weapons smuggling, drug trafficking, extortion, and operations in 17 different systems. And this evidence is already in the hands of people the Syndicate can't reach, Chen said calmly. Copies are with friends throughout the galaxy, with automatic transmission protocols if I disappear or die. Killing me would just trigger the release of everything I've gathered. Zarathek stood motionless, processing this information. His simple elimination contract had become something far more complex. The human wasn't just a witness to be silenced. He was an investigator who had thoroughly prepared for exactly this situation. You planned for assassination attempts, the mercenary observed. I planned for everything I could think of, Chen replied, including the possibility that the Syndicate would hire someone like you. Someone like me? A professional killer with a reputation for never failing, Chen said. Someone so dangerous that most people would assume my death was inevitable once the contract was taken. Chen returned to his computer and continued entering data. Which is why I'm betting that your reputation matters more to you than this particular contract. Zarathek's mandibles clicked in confusion. Explain. Your perfect success rate is based on completing contracts, right? You've never failed because you've never taken a contract you couldn't complete. But this contract can't be completed successfully. The human gestured to his computer screen. If you kill me, the evidence gets released automatically and the Syndicate gets exposed anyway. If you don't kill me, I continue investigating and they get exposed eventually. Either way, the Syndicate loses. And I fail my first contract, Zarathek said slowly. Only if you define success as making the Syndicate's problems disappear, Chen replied. But there's another way to look at it. The merchant finished his data entry and turned to face the massive alien. What if you defined success as discovering the truth about what you were really hired to protect? Zarathek found himself considering possibilities he had never contemplated before. In 20 years as a mercenary, he had never questioned the details of his contracts beyond what was necessary to complete them. Payment was payment, targets were targets. But now, faced with evidence of the Syndicate's operations and the implications of his own actions, he was beginning to understand what David Chen had been trying to tell him about choice and purpose. Show me, he said finally. Show you what? The evidence. Show me what the Syndicate hired me to protect. Chen's expression shifted from determination to something approaching hope. Are you sure you want to know? Zarathek lowered his claws and stepped back from the desk. For the first time since entering the trading post, he was not positioned to attack. Show me, he repeated. Chen began pulling up files on his computer, and Zarathek saw images that made his chitinous exterior crawl. Children of various species in cages, families separated and sold to different buyers, documents describing the deliberate breaking of spirits to make slaves more compliant. As the evidence mounted, Zarathek felt something he had never experienced before. Shame. Not for his capabilities or his profession, but for what he had been willing to protect without asking questions. This is what you were hired to cover up, Chen said quietly. This is what the Syndicate wanted to preserve by silencing me. The mercenary stared at the images in silence. Somewhere in the past few hours, his simple elimination contract had become something entirely different. He was no longer just deciding whether to kill a target. He was deciding what kind of being he wanted to be. The silence in David Chen's trading post stretched for several minutes as Zarathek processed what he had seen. Images of enslaved children haunted his mind. The scale of the Syndicate's operations was far beyond what he had imagined when he accepted the contract. I require time to consider this information, Zarathek said finally. Of course, Chen replied. But while you're considering, there's something else you should know. The human's expression had grown more serious. There was a coldness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. When I first detected the Syndicate's operations 3 years ago, I tried working through proper channels. I filed reports with local authorities, contacted Galactic Council representatives, even tried reaching out to some of the more reputable criminal organizations to see if they would pressure the syndicate to stop. Chen pulled up another set of files on his computer. Nothing worked. The syndicate had too many officials bought off, too many people afraid to act, too many competing interests. The slavery continued. So you took direct action, Zarathek observed. I tried to, Chen said. I attempted to rescue some of the victims myself, hired a team of freelance operators to hit one of their smaller facilities. The display showed mission reports and casualty lists. Zarathek read them with growing unease. The rescue attempt failed, Chen continued. The syndicate was waiting for us. My entire team was killed, and the slaves we tried to rescue were executed as an example to others. Something in the human's tone made Zarathek's predatory instincts activate. David Chen no longer sounded like a peaceful merchant. He sounded like something much more dangerous. That's when I realized my mistake, Chen said quietly. I had been thinking like a civilized being, trying to work within systems and institutions. But the syndicate doesn't operate that way. They understand only force and fear. The human turned to face Zarathek directly. So I stopped being civilized. Chen activated another display showing a complex organizational chart. Over the past 2 years, I've systematically identified every syndicate operation in this sector, not just the slavery, everything. Their drug labs, weapon caches, money laundering operations, safe houses, communication networks. Zarathek studied the chart with professional appreciation. It showed the kind of detailed intelligence gathering that would have taken his species years to accomplish. Impressive reconnaissance, he admitted. Reconnaissance was just the first phase, Chen replied. The second phase was more direct. The display changed to show a series of incident reports from various systems. 17 syndicate operations have suffered accidents in the past year. Labs destroyed by chemical explosions. Weapon caches detonated by faulty storage. Computer systems corrupted by viruses. Transport ships experiencing catastrophic engine failures. Zarathek's eyes widened as he recognized the pattern. You have been conducting a covert war against the syndicate. I've been eliminating threats to innocent lives, Chen corrected. The syndicate just happened to be those threats. The human pulled up detailed schematics of various syndicate facilities. Each operation was carefully planned to look like an accident or system failure. No evidence of outside interference. No way to trace the problems back to a single source. Until now, Zarathek observed. Until now, Chen agreed. Because someone at the syndicate finally connected the pattern of accidents to my investigation of the slave operation. That's why they hired you. The mercenary was beginning to understand the true scope of the situation. David Chen wasn't just a witness to be silenced. He was an active enemy who had been systematically destroying syndicate operations for months. You are the one who has been causing their losses, Zarathek said. Guilty as charged, Chen replied with a cold smile. Turns out humans can be quite effective when we put our minds to something. But now they know. Your covert war is exposed. That's why you're here, Chen agreed. But here's what the syndicate doesn't understand about humans. We plan for contingencies. Chen activated his communication system and began transmitting on multiple frequencies simultaneously. All units, this is Chen. Authorization Omega 77. Execute final protocol immediately. Across the galaxy, Zarathek watched as automated systems activated in dozens of locations. The displays showed real-time feeds from what appeared to be major syndicate facilities. For 2 years, I've been placing more than just surveillance equipment in syndicate operations, Chen explained. Every facility I've accessed has been prepared for complete destruction. The only thing stopping me from activating those systems was the hope that I could save more slaves through continued covert action. The feeds showed explosions, fires, and system failures occurring simultaneously across 17 different worlds. In less than 10 minutes, the Syndicate's entire network was being systematically destroyed. But since they've escalated to assassination attempts, Chen continued, I've decided that salvaging operations isn't worth the risk of letting them continue to hurt people. Zarathek watched in amazement as billions of credits worth of Syndicate assets disappeared in coordinated destruction. This single human had just crippled one of the galaxy's largest criminal organizations. You have destroyed them, the mercenary said. Not yet, Chen replied. This was just their infrastructure. The people responsible are still alive. The human pulled up a new display showing personnel files and locations. Phase 3 begins now. Zarathek saw detailed dossiers on hundreds of Syndicate members, from low-level enforcers to the organization's leadership council. Each file included current locations, security details, and what appeared to be elimination plans. You intend to kill them all, Zarathek observed. I intend to make sure they can never hurt anyone again, Chen corrected. For most of them, that means death. For others, it means exposure to authorities who can't be bought. For a few, it means facing the families of their victims. The display zoomed in on specific targets. I've spent 2 years preparing for this moment. Every Syndicate leader has been infiltrated, monitored, and marked for elimination. My people are already in position. Your people? Chen smiled grimly. Did you think I was working alone? Humans have this peculiar trait. When we find a cause worth fighting for, we inspire others to join us. My investigation team includes former slaves, parents of victims, law enforcement officers who were frustrated by corruption, even some former criminals who decided they wanted to do something meaningful with their lives. The communication system activated again, showing incoming reports from across the galaxy. Target 7 eliminated, came one voice. Target 12 in custody, reported another. Target 3 chose suicide over capture, said a third. Zarathek watched in fascination as decades of Syndicate leadership were systematically eliminated in a coordinated strike that spanned multiple star systems. How many? He asked. 47 primary targets, Chen replied, 83 secondary targets, 116 operational personnel. By tomorrow morning, the Syndicate will cease to exist as an organization. The mercenary felt that unfamiliar sensation again, something that might have been awe. In 20 years of professional killing, he had never seen anything approaching this scale of coordinated elimination. You have conducted a war, he said. I've conducted a justice operation, Chen corrected, though I suppose the distinction depends on your perspective. Zarathek's communication device chimed again. Vexmore's image appeared, but this time the Sauran looked panicked. Zarathek! Emergency recall! All contracts suspended! The Syndicate is under massive attack! The transmission cut to static, then died completely. That would be Target 22, Chen said calmly, checking his list. Vexmore had a particularly detailed file. Did you know he personally supervised the sale of over 3,000 children? The human's tone was conversational, but Zarathek detected something underneath it that made his predatory instincts scream warnings. This was not the voice of a peaceful merchant. This was the voice of an apex predator discussing its hunting methods. You planned this entire encounter, Zarathek realized. Of course I did, Chen replied. When I learned the Syndicate had hired you, I knew they were escalating beyond what I could handle quietly, so I accelerated my timeline. The human gestured to the displays showing the ongoing destruction. Your arrival here was the signal to begin final protocol. Whether you killed me or not, the Syndicate was always going to be destroyed tonight. Then why engage me in conversation? Why show me their operations? Chen studied Zarathek's massive form thoughtfully. Because you're not actually evil, are you? You're just someone with dangerous skills who's been applying them without asking the right questions. The human paused, watching reports continue to come in from across the galaxy. I thought you might be interested in asking different questions. About purpose, about choice, about what kind of galaxy you want to live in. Zarathek felt an emotion he had never experienced before. Humility. This human had outplanned, outmaneuvered, and out-executed him completely. More than that, Chen had shown him perspectives he had never considered. The contract is void, Zarathek said finally. There is no syndicate to pay me. True, Chen agreed. But there's another contract you might consider. Speak. Chen pulled up a new set of files showing various criminal organizations throughout the galaxy. The syndicate wasn't the only group trafficking in slaves and misery. There are others who need to learn the same lesson about underestimating humans. The mercenary studied the intelligence reports with professional interest. Each organization was thoroughly documented with detailed analysis of their operations and vulnerabilities. You offer employment? I offer purpose, Chen corrected. Your skills are impressive, Zarathek, but applied to the right targets, they could be meaningful. For several moments, Zarathek considered the offer. 20 years of contracts had brought him wealth and reputation, but never the sense of meaningful purpose this human was describing. Payment terms? He asked. Standard mercenary rates, Chen replied, plus something most employers can't offer, the knowledge that your targets deserve what they receive. The communication system activated again, showing more reports from the ongoing operation. Syndicate Leadership Council eliminated, came a voice. All primary targets confirmed down. Secondary targets 60% complete. Chen nodded with satisfaction. Ahead of schedule. My people are efficient. Your people are human, Zarathek observed. Some of them, Chen agreed. Others are species like yours, beings with dangerous capabilities who decided to use them for something worthwhile. The implication was clear. Zarathek would not be the first predator species to join Chen's organization. I accept your employment offer, Zarathek said formally. Welcome to the team, Chen replied. Fair warning, we operate differently than you're used to. We choose targets based on the harm they cause, not the payment they offer. We research extensively before acting, and we never harm innocent beings, regardless of circumstances. Understood. Chen activated another display showing a new target organization. Your first assignment is the Helix Cartel. They've been trafficking Altarian younglings for organ harvesting. The evidence is comprehensive, the targets are confirmed, and elimination is authorized. Zarathek studied the files with renewed interest. For the first time in his career, he was looking at targets who deserved elimination rather than simply paying for it. Timeline? 2 weeks preparation, then coordinated strike, Chen replied. You'll be working with a mixed team, 3 humans, 2 Corvan, and a Sectar technical specialist. The mercenary nodded acceptance. What happened to the syndicate slaves? Rescue operations are already underway, Chen said. My people have been monitoring their locations for months. By tomorrow, they'll all be free and receiving medical care. Chen deactivated the displays and turned to face Zarathek directly. You asked earlier if I fear death. The truth is, I stopped fearing death when I started seeing things worth dying for. Tonight, you've seen what the Syndicate was willing to kill to protect. Tomorrow, you'll start seeing what humans are willing to die to defend. The massive alien stood silent for a moment, processing everything that had occurred. When he had entered this trading post hours ago, he was a simple mercenary completing a routine contract. Now he was part of something far more complex and meaningful. One question, Zarathek said finally. Yes? The human military history you showed me earlier, the Soul War, the destruction of the hegemony. Was that meant as a warning? Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. That was meant as education. You needed to understand what you're dealing with when you threaten a human seriously. The merchant moved to his desk and began shutting down systems for the evening. The syndicate made the same mistake the hegemony did. They assumed that because humans look soft and weak, we actually are soft and weak. They thought threatening one human merchant would be a simple matter. Instead, they triggered final protocol, Zarathek observed. They pushed a human to rage, Chen corrected. And as tonight has demonstrated, that's the last mistake anyone ever makes. The alien mercenary looked around the trading post one final time. Hours ago, it had seemed like an ordinary commercial establishment. Now he understood it was actually the command center for one of the most effective covert operations he had ever witnessed. The galaxy will remember this night, Zarathek said. The galaxy will learn from this night, Chen replied. Just like you have. As they left the trading post together, Zarathek realized he was no longer the galaxy's scariest mercenary. That title now belonged to someone else entirely. Someone who looked soft and weak and harmless, someone human. And across the galaxy, in criminal organizations that thought they understood the threats they faced, beings were beginning to learn a lesson that the hegemony and the syndicate had learned too late. When you push humans to rage, you don't get a fight. You get extinction.